tricky. First of all, it doesn't involve, is it an infraction or a misdemeanor or a felony traffic ticket? It's an infraction. The law says that if there is an infraction, the person who committed that infraction will not face jail time. If I go to court and I don't face jail time, then I don't have the right to have an attorney. And technically, neither do I have the right to have an interpreter. However, the courts provide help to or the county provides help to the courts in traffic court. Otherwise, it will be impossible for them to carry out business. So we do interpret in traffic court a lot. This is an infraction, not a misdemeanor. Usually, you don't get a public defender, obviously, and you may bring your own attorney, but it is very rare, unless it's not even if you go to trial. The problem with traffic court is, for us interpreters, is that precisely the fact that there is no attorney involved creates a lot of problems for us. Because now you have to interpret for somebody who doesn't know the formalities of the court. And the judge tells them, today is the day for your arraignment and blah, 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 blah. And in fact, we will, after the break, do a tape from an actual traffic court here in the county of Los Angeles. I want you to hear that. And you will see that the instructions are very clear, but when they come forward and they talk to the judge and the judge asks, how do you plea? They don't say guilty or not guilty. They just start explaining. So it creates a lot of problems for us because you don't even know what the person is going to say. That's number one. Number two, in most traffic courts, what you're going to find is that instead of a judge saying everything, let's say that a judge takes the bench, okay? And the judge is going to say some instructions to everybody who's here. Now, we have a huge crowd, all right? So if we see, for example, if the person sitting in the back over there speaks Spanish and the person sitting here speaks Spanish, how can I interpret for both, whatever the judge is saying? Now, that's a logistic problem. And that's why in traffic court, when you work in the court system, the very first thing you do is you talk to the bailiff, who is the person in charge of the courtroom, and you ask the bailiff, how do they usually handle people that speak Spanish? Do you put all of them in the first 2-3 rows, like what we did in criminal 1 for initial appearance? Or how do you handle that? And furthermore, you may want to find out from the bailiff whether the judge is going to be reading this to the audience, or whether the judge or the bailiff is going to be playing a tape. It depends on the court. Now, you need to get everybody in one place. But even that creates problems, because you may have everybody in one place at 8:30, but somebody walks at 8:45 and that person is sitting in the back, and he or she speaks Spanish. And here is the problem. When the judge calls the case, the judge is going to ask the person, each one, did you understand the rights? Did you understand what I said? And some people, as an interpreter, you pray that they say yes. But sometimes they say no, and then the judge thinks that it's your fault because the judge doesn't know that person showed up late. So it's really a difficult thing for us interpreters. We all sort of hate it. It's very straightforward in terms of the interpretation. Now, if you want to do this right, it's not that straightforward, and we're going to learn the right way of doing this in terms of vocabulary. First thing that we want to look at is some terms that do change, like defendant is no longer in traffic court, is no longer acusado o procesado. No hay un proceso en contra de esta persona. No se le acusa de un delito. In traffic court, and only in traffic court, defendant is infractor. So the verb to charge can no longer be acusar. And that's clear because no se acusa de una infracción. So to charge is really difficult. Sometimes the judge will say, Mr. Rodriguez, you are charged with failing to stop at a stop sign. Okay, this one you have to massage the rendition. So you could say, se le hizo acción por. So when you say, for example, you are charged with failure to stop at a red light. Señor Rodríguez, se le hizo una infracción por no detenerse en un semáforo en rojo. Okay. You are charged with failure to stop at a stop sign. Señor Rodríguez, se le hizo una infracción por no detenerse en un rótulo de alto o pare, whichever you want to use. The word sign in traffic no es señal ni cartel, es rótulo. Have you heard that word? Sign. Rótulo. Mr. Rodriguez, you are charged with, I don't know, not having insurance. Señor Rodríguez, se le hizo una infracción por no tener seguro automovilístico. Now, you cannot say se le acusa. Because somebody who speaks proper Spanish will say, ¿cómo? ¿Qué me están acusando de qué? And definitely you can refer to the person as acusado, o procesado, o indiciado, o inculpado, or whatever. Because if you do that, then you are really mixing criminal with civil. It's important to make a very clear distinction between infractions, felonies and misdemeanors, which fall into criminal, and civil matters. Because even the word defendant, look how interesting it is. In criminal es acusado, in traffic is infractor, and in civil is demandado. Same word. If I'm in a civil case, I'm not going to be referring to the defendant as el acusado. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody is being charged with any crime in civil matters. It's all monetary issues. There are no crimes. Okay? So and to charge, which in this case it's a verb that overlaps criminal and traffic, it has a different translation. So the issue with this, with traffic court, is that they talk about a bail a lot. And it sounds odd to use the word fianza or caución. But really, you could use caución, because in Spanish, caución is not defined only for criminal matters. Una caución means algo es dinero, el cual garantiza la comparecencia de la persona. So we can do that. We can use caución. But there is a difference between criminal court and civil court. The bail amount becomes the fine if you don't show up. They are not going to arrest you. If you don't show up, let's say, for example, I show up in traffic court today for my arraignment, and I say not guilty. If I say not guilty, I'm going to have a trial. Okay? Now, they want to make sure that they have the money, the fine amount, because maybe I never show up. So what they do is they set an amount of bail, okay, equivalent to the value of the fine. But they call it bail. They can't technically call it fine, because the definition of a fine is paying after sentencing, after you're found guilty. You can't be given a fine before you're found guilty. And by the way, guilty, culpable, let's just look at that in a second. So that bail, the judge will say, you will have to post a, $200 bail, which if you fail to appear, that will become the fine, and that's the end of the case. Usted tendrá que depositar una caución de $200 y si usted no comparece, esa caución pasará a ser la multa, y si no viene, no hay ningún problema. In fact, many times when you call, that they give you, like, let's say that they give you a ticket in, San Bernardino, and you live in LA, which is pretty far, and you don't want to go there. You can call, and you think you're paying a fine. You're really paying the bail amount. And when they call your case, since you are not there, that bail becomes fine, and the ticket is paid. Okay. So, question? No. We're going to look at the verb to charge. Yeah, acusar o imputar is a much more general term for the verb to charge. But I would prefer that you use se le hizo una infracción. Imputar is a neutral term, believe it or not. You could use it to charge in any instance, even in immigration court, by the way. Immigration court, people are charged with things, but they are not charged with crimes necessarily. And in those cases, you could use the word imputar, but that's a little bit too off the subject. So now the question, of course, is you guilty or not guilty? Now, do we say soy culpable de cometer la infracción o responsable por cometer la infracción? It's way better, right? If I say, for example, responsable is better. If I say, for example, Mr. Rodriguez, are you guilty or not guilty of, committing that infraction? ¿Es usted culpable o no culpable? ¿Cómo culpable? ¿De qué me están culpando? ¿De una culpa? ¿De qué? It's more like, ¿es usted responsable de cometer esa infracción? Okay? So you can, if you want, it's not as bad as to charge, okay? And it's not as bad as calling the defendant acusado, but guilty, you can use responsable. And not guilty, no es responsable. So you see how suddenly all these things that are so embedded in our heads because we are actually working our brains, we are working in criminal matters, we have to sort of switch the page and look at different terminology. Now, what happens with it? Why do you go to traffic court? By the way, how do you say traffic court? Tribunal de Tránsito, Juzgado de Tránsito, no de tráfico. Here's the proper definition or difference between tráfico y tránsito. Tráfico is anything that moves. Tránsito is something that refers to the subject matter. So we talk about tráfico de drogas, tráfico en las calles, but when we talk about the subject matter, traffic court, when it is used as an adjective, traffic court, we use Tribunal de Tránsito. Okay. They also use the code, for example, is known as traffic code. You can say Código de Tránsito. You could also hear in Spain, particularly, Código Vial. Have you heard that word, vial, V-I-A-L? Yeah. That means traffic. Now, why do I have to go to traffic court? Because I committed an infraction, porque cometí una infracción. And what happens when I commit an infraction? Well, the first thing that happens is that the police officer stops me. And, I failed to stop at a stop sign or at a red light. So they ask me for driver's license or stuff. And after all that, the police officer will tell me why. And they make me sign something. That thing that they make me sign is known as a citation. And that citation has a very unique translation in Spanish. Because what are you signing? You're really signing, you're agreeing that you're going to show up in court on the date and time indicated right next to the signature. So this is sort of your promise to appear in court. So the word appear plays a very important role here. Comparecencia. And because this citation is a legal document, in Spanish we translate that as acta de comparecencia. Acta. Acta has this connotation of being legal. Acta, like record, formal. Sometimes it's also known as promise to appear in a much more informal way, which is, of course, is promesa de comparecer. But that's less formal. Now, that citation is usually known by people as tickets. We don't say, oh, the police officer issued a citation against me. Gave me a ticket. Now, the reason why it's known as ticket is because it's like any ticket. They just remove it from a bunch of it and give it to you. That's where the word ticket comes in. Now, there are many ways you could transfer the word ticket. One way is boleta. It's very common. Me hicieron una boleta. They gave me a ticket. Me hicieron o me dieron, either one. They issue or they gave me. Boleta de tránsito. And we're going to keep that one because that's the common one and everybody uses that term. No es un tiquete. Sometimes I hear, in the past I even heard interpreters saying, el sherife le hizo un tiquete. What the hell is that? El sheriff. Yeah, yeah. I don't know why this coming of this sheriff. What the hell is that? El sheriff me hizo un tiquete. Okay. So we got that, boleta de tránsito. And now the next question is, what is, but there is another word that is used a lot, which is a violation, right? They're talking about traffic violation. No es violación. Violation in this case is infracción de tránsito. So now look at the word violation per se. You have to use quebranto if it's violation of a section. You have to use infracción if the violation is a traffic violation. And you can use violación when the violation is non-specific. Violation of my rights, violation of my constitutional rights, violation of the law, violación de la ley, violación de las garantías constitucionales. Okay? That traffic violation can be of two types. It could be a parking violation, or it could be a moving violation. Okay, definitely moving violation es una violación mientras me estaba moviendo. That sounds like rape. So parking violation translates into Spanish infracción por mal estacionamiento, por estacionarse mal, whatever you want to use. Please don't use parqueo. And a moving violation is different because a parking violation is against the car. A moving violation is against the driver. So the translation for that is infracción en circulación. Circular, when you're moving, right? Okay. Now, there are different types of... Do you have a question, Miss?
Yeah. I've heard, because I have Salvadorian friends, and they always say el parqueo, lugar, parqueo. Yo sé que es estacionamiento, pero what if we have someone that...
If somebody says el parqueo, you say the parking. Yeah. But it shouldn't come out from your mouth. You have to understand it, but you shouldn't say it. Aparcar y todo eso, that might be okay, but parqueo, no. Estacionamiento. Okay, so when we talk about this, so what's a typical, we know what parking violation is. You stop at a meter. How do you say meter? Exactamente. Parquímetro. That one is okay. Parquí. And parquímetro, an accent on the I. So, anyways, you stop there and you stay there for a longer period of time, then they give you a parking violation, or you park in the wrong place. Yeah.
What happens when they park in a zone, let's just say in a permit zone, and they either risk of a ticket or a toll, and they use instead of having a meter, they use something that is called a recon. How do you call that?
What is that? The recon.
They call it a recon.
And what is that?
It's basically a device where they write your information of your car, like the VIN number and your license plate, and it automatically issues the ticket.
Oh, I don't know what that is. The recon or whatever. I don't think they have that in Latin America. That's probably why there is no transfer. So if it's just the police officer has a recon, which is something like an
Kind of like an electronic.
and then they write it, and then they.
They write the ticket and it prints it right away.
I don't know what I would say for that. The recon, I don't know. I would probably say it depends on the context. I don't know how they will come up, but parking. Yeah, parking violation was issued by the police officer using the recon. Okay, una infracción de tránsito fue expedida por el agente de policía utilizando un sistema electrónico, automático. Maybe that's what I would say, but I don't know if there is a specific name for that. I have no idea. Yeah, no, I believe you, but I just don't know what that means. Now, in terms of so we know what parking violation is, but moving violation is different. And in that moving violation, you have things such as failure to yield, for example. How do you say failure to yield? No ceder el paso. How do you say pedestrians? Peatones. How do you say, for example, traffic light? Semáforo. Eh? No, you can't say luz de. But sometimes they say, for example, you failed to stop at a red light. And if you say, usted no se detuvo en una luz en rojo, en realidad it's like a colloquialism for us, but technically, from the point of view of the law, when you talk about una luz, hay muchas luces en rojo en la calle. Which one is it? But when you say semáforo, you know that it is to control traffic flow. Yeah, so you need to use that. What about this insurance? No, aseguranza does not exist. Seguro, and I will say seguro de automóvil, and I'll tell you why. I'm going to share something with you. Aseguranza doesn't exist. Aseguranza no. Empresa aseguradora, asegurar as a verb to insure, but not the insurance is not called aseguranza. Everybody uses that term though, huh? Yeah, but the TV doesn't, they don't know. People that are on TV right now are more stupid than ever before. They have no idea what they're doing. Look at all those shows that people follow. I mean, it's really stupid. So don't pay any attention because transeúnte is passerby. See, if you want to use transeúnte, it's more like a passerby. It's different. So, okay, passerby, transeúnte. Now, let me tell you why for insurance you have to say seguro de automóvil or de auto, okay? One time, and it happened to me many times actually, but I just recall one instance. I was interpreting in traffic court, and a couple of things about protocol that with this, while I tell you this, you're going to learn a couple of interesting things. Usually, when there is traffic court, this traffic court is, okay, there are different type of traffic courts, okay? One building that spends all the time doing traffic court, one courtroom, that's it. Or there are other courtrooms where they have traffic tickets for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then they have misdemeanors and felonies. In those places where they have misdemeanor, felonies, and traffic, all of it in the same courtroom, when the traffic portion of the calendar is taking place, usually the bailiff, they are not even there because these people don't have guns. They didn't commit any crime. So they are basically in the lockup, in the cells, getting ready for the misdemeanors. So when a person comes in, a person who committed a traffic violation, and stands before the judge, and you're to the left of that person interpreting, the judge is going to, let's say the judge says, Mr. Rodriguez, you're here because you didn't have insurance. And then you say, Señor Rodriguez, estoy aquí porque no tenía seguro. Sí tengo seguro. Yes, I have insurance. You have it with you? ¿Lo tiene con usted? Sí, claro, claro. Yes, of course, I do. Can you show it to me? ¿Me lo puede mostrar? And then he pulls out a social security card. Because for some people, seguro is social security. Okay. Now, let's say that now indeed he does show up. One time I had one person who actually showed it to the judge, and in a travel insurance has nothing to do with insurance for your car. But if they do provide you with the proper insurance, then they give you the paper. You're not supposed to get anything. You're not supposed to grab anything from anybody. But so you look for the bailiff. If the bailiff is not around, then you will put it in your hand and get it in your hand, and then the judge wants to see it, obviously. So before I even go to see the judge to give the judge the paper, I will say, "May I approach, Your Honor?" And then the judge will say, "Certainly." So you give the paper, and then you come back and you continue interpreting while the judge examines that paper. Then the judge will say, "Here you go, sir." And then there's no bailiff, so you have to go and get it. And again, you say, "May I approach, Your Honor?" Every time, because that area called the well, la zona prohibida, is basically this area. Let me show you where it is. The well is, no, this is the wrong one. Let me see if I have it right here. Yeah. I'll show you what the well is. La zona prohibida. That part, if anybody goes through it, that person can get arrested. Do you see this picture here? It's between this table, the table here with these purple chairs, and where the judge is located. This area is called the well. This area, well, not now, but that area is called the well, okay? You cannot go, so when you're standing here with the defendant, el infractor, you need to ask permission to go through it. Otherwise, you could be arrested. And they won't do that, but technically, it's not an area. It doesn't show, it shows that you don't know the formalities of the court, all right? Now, the other thing that you're going to hear, that some of the traffic violations that are very common are, for example, gridlock. Have you heard this word? Esto es en español obstrucción a la circulación. You know, it means when you double park, for example, or when you go to the left turn pocket and you don't make the left turn when the traffic, and so everybody stops because you're actually stuck there in the middle of the road. They also talk about, okay, failure to stop, no detenerse, o no pararse. Detenerse is very tricky, because look at it this context. The police officer stopped the driver, and you say, el agente de policía detuvo al conductor, it sounds like he was arrested. So we like to use paró al, even though detener is nothing wrong with it, but it could be misconstrued. What about to pull over? To pull over, orillar. And what about when they say a point in your license? All right, this is the first time that this was actually registered in any traffic code was in the traffic code in Colombia, and it was in 2008. And the translation for point is punto negativo. Un punto negativo en su licencia. Sometimes they say in your driving record. How do you say driving record? Antecedentes de manejo. We wouldn't use historial. Historial will be if it says driving history. History is historial. Record is antecedentes. Okay, what about, okay, we know traffic. Okay, what about this one? A child without a restraining seat. Es simplemente un niño, o una niña puede ser, sin su, what? Asiento reglamentario. Okay, question, yes?
Since this is not like so formal, now we can say niño, niña instead of menor.
The question is, because it's not so formal, can you say niño, niña, or menor? Well, the problem with menor is that somebody is 18 years, 17 years of age, is legally a minor, and that person doesn't need to have a restraining seat. So it can be misconstrued. So you usually say un niño, una niña. In our mind, when we hear niño, niña, yeah, maybe it's possible that that person needs a restraining seat. So it's preferable to use that. Okay, and the proceedings occur as follows. First, you have the arraignment. Now, question for arraignment. Do you use instrucción de cargos, or what do you use? Lectura de cargos? Lectura de las infracciones o de la infracción. Because, you know, it's different. No hay cargos aquí. There are no counts. Okay, although sometimes they do if you commit two more infractions. So it's not too bad to use lectura de cargos, but infracción is more appropriate. After the arraignment, you enter a not guilty plea. Presente usted una declaración de no ser responsable. O se declara no responsable, that's all you should say. You enter a not guilty plea, se declara no responsable de esa infracción. And then what happens is that if you enter a not guilty plea, you have a trial. In that trial, it's going to be you and the police officer. You meaning the person the defendant. If the defendant needs an interpreter, those are really a nightmare. Because imagine if the defendant doesn't know what to do or say in an arraignment, can you imagine in a trial? They don't know that they can make an opening statement. They don't know that they can question the police officer or how to question, and they don't know that they can make a statement of their own, and then they don't know that they can do a closing argument. So it becomes very, very difficult for the interpreter, not because of the material. The subject matter is pretty straightforward, but because of that lack of knowledge of how the system works in a court of law. Okay. So then during so you have the arraignment, la lectura de las infracciones, and then after that you will have a trial if you enter a not guilty plea, and in a trial they decide who wins, and that's pretty much it. Now, if the police officer doesn't show up, what happens? There is going to be a default judgment. Judgment is fallo. You could also use the word sentencia. And in this case, that default really means because the other party didn't do what he or she was supposed to do. But in this particular case, the other party just didn't show up. So we always say fallo o sentencia por falta de comparecencia. Now, be careful with default, because sometimes you can win a case by default because the other party is not answering questions or documents or is not submitting evidence. That's more in civil. If that's the case, it doesn't mean that the default is because a person didn't show up. The default is because the person is not doing what the judge is ordering the person to do. So default judgment also is known as sentencia en contumacia. Have you heard that word? No. Contumacia en rebeldía. Have you heard that word? Yeah, both are the same. In different countries, they use different things. But it really means that the other person didn't want to do whatever he or she was supposed to do. That's more like a civil term. Okay? And it has nothing to do with failure to appear. So in a civil matter, very rarely people win because the person failed to appear. People win because the other person didn't do what they're supposed to do. In civil, it's just an exchange of questions and answers and filing, and the other one has to file and has to respond. That doesn't happen in criminal matters. There is no default judgment in criminal matters because they already have the defendant. The defendant is not going to go anywhere. But yeah.
Are you saying that if a person does not show up in a civil court, then it's a default judgment?
No. If a person doesn't show up in civil court, is that automatically default judgment? No. The judge will give more opportunity and more opportunity and more opportunity. Now, if it is a civil court like a small claims when there are no attorneys, it's a very short proceeding, yes, because they don't want to extend it. So, small claims, typically the other person will win. Maybe in an eviction, maybe they will give them, in an unlawful detainer case, they will give them more chance. But in a typical civil case, people have, the defendant or the plaintiff, they have sufficient time. In other words, if they don't show up once, the judge calls them and warns them that they have to show up, or the clerk sends a letter, or whatever the case is. So it doesn't happen automatically. Yeah. Any questions on this? Unlawful detainer is something completely different. And it has to do with, now this is off the subject. Anyway, we finished with traffic court terminology. But unlawful detainer is when somebody is not paying rent and needs to be kicked out of that apartment or that house. Then an action is generated called an unlawful detainer action. In Spanish, it's known as juicio de desahucio. Okay. In Colombia they call it lanzamiento. Juicio de lanzamiento, porque literalmente lo lanzan a la calle. Lo ponen de patitas en la calle, con todo lo que tiene adentro, se lo tira afuera y que se arregle. It's sort of the same as an eviction, but the unlawful detainer gives the landlord the right to evict. So it says, so to evict is desalojar. And it has nothing to do, even though it says unlawful detainer, people think that it has to do with detención ilegal. It has nothing to do with that. It's more like it has to do with actually eviction hearings. And this brings a completely different set of vocabulary. Questions on this? Okay, so we basically finished with traffic court terminology for those of you who are watching online, so we're going to finish that session for you. For those of you here, I want you to listen to an actual tape from an actual traffic court where the judge talks to everybody, and then we're going to be getting some more vocabulary. I got to look for the tape, so I'm going to play another tape beforehand, which is criminal. Yes, ma'am.